So now I'd like to introduce you to Jessica Andexer. She got in touch with me and Sue after the first webinar last year. And we both really found her ideas and her approach really stimulating and thought-provoking. So in the spirit of collaboration, Jessica joined us to plan this event and kindly agreed to make a presentation as well. So Jessica's worked for over 20 years in the field of mental health in many capacities. And fascinatingly, she began a meditation practice herself as a child. And she's weaves this into her work as a trainer, a consultant, and wellbeing guide. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what you bring to us, Jessica. So I'll hand over to you now.
Hello. Do let me know if you can't. I'm always saying if you can't hear me or see me and things like that. Yeah, I'm not going to talk for too long either. I will kind of just start by saying a little bit about myself. So my background is, yeah, as Bob said, in mental health, primarily working as a psychotherapist since 2006. Also training in mindfulness and use of somatic movement and breathwork within that. Two areas I specialised in is trauma and the other is neurodivergence. And it kind of led me to do a lot of training around the kind of neurobiology of stress and distress and kind of looking at how our nervous system functions, either because of experiences that we've had or because we just belong to a different neurotype and maybe we process sensations and information differently. And so I identify as neurodivergent. I'm one of the people that would have that tick in the voting box. I can really identify with a couple of people who put in the box there, I am autistic. I'm not, I have autism. So I am autistic, but I have a bunch of other neurodivergent things going on. Some of which I've always known about and some of which I've only found out about much later in life. My daughter is also autistic, so I fall into like three quite different categories of an individual who's experiencing sensory processing differently, experiencing things like mindfulness differently, the world differently, but also someone who has been a carer and a parent and someone who is a professional. So I kind of straddle these different places. And when I saw Sue's talk back in May, I was so excited because so much of my own experiences and so much of the things I'd noticed with some of my clients or many of my clients were things that I felt like she was for the first time really talking about. I got really excited and thought, this is great. This is someone who's actually sort of doing this stuff. And I've kind of been exploring some of my own ideas and kind of thinking, well, how do I want to incorporate this in my work? And how do I want to incorporate what I've been doing and teaching for many years around the kind of neurobiology of stress and distress and the therapy stuff and the mindfulness stuff, and how do I bring these things together? So really I'm just going to kind of describe a little bit of my work, and some of it I'm afraid is probably a little bit of a repeat. I hope not too much of some of the stuff that Sue was saying, but I do really align myself with a lot of what she says. So I'm gonna share my screen, and it's all a bit I don't have my glasses on, so I'm hoping I'm sharing it okay. Great, so this is me, and I'm trying to create some workshops and work, and the work that I've been doing one-to-one and in groups is really, I'm kind of thinking of it as a neuroscience informed approach, because I'm really keen to think, how does the brain function, how does the nervous system function, and how does it receive these different ways of becoming mindful? So kind of really running over in some ways, you know, the things that Sue was saying of kind of the problems with being still. And if we have sensitivity in our nervous system, that is absolutely one of the issues that's going to make mindfulness really tricky for some people. So this sensitivity, I'm going to do something with you in just a moment actually that might make it easy. It certainly has been for me an easier way to understand it. So often when we're sitting still and noticing, if we have this sensitivity for a range of reasons, we're triggering the autonomic nervous system's threat response. And it can mean that we feel too unsafe, fearful, agitated, or shut down to come into noticing. And I wanted to kind of really point out that this is not the same as kind of having thoughts and being really busy and worried. This is something that's sort of so extreme that it's making it impossible to actually notice the present moment. So I think that's where for me is kind of the pull, because I think in my own practice, I've often had teachers and people saying to me, just stay with the noticing because this busyness will pass. But actually my ability to process sensations and data and stuff was happening in such a different way that never worked. Just staying and noticing never worked for me. So one of the ways I really like to look at this, I don't know if you've got this option on your screen. I can kind of drag the line out so that I make the screen share smaller and the picture of the person bigger. If you have that, I like it because then you can see me. I'm hoping you can all see me. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just take your hand up in front of you. And you don't have to, you can just imagine this, or you can just look at me doing it with my hand, okay? But if you can and you want to, you can join in. So you take your hand up, you have a look at your hand. Your hand, just this is very, very simplistic. Your hand, and this down here, this is traveling down to your body. This is your brain, okay? So if you just curl your thumb in and curl your fingers over, and like I say, you can just watch me doing it, or you can join in and do it too. In a very simplistic way, we're going to say these fingers are the front part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that does negotiating and reflecting and all the sorts of clever stuff that we think of as sort of human beings being at their best, their cleverest. It's the fingers here. Yeah. This is also the place where we are noticing from. Yeah, so this is really important, this part of the brain, when it comes to noticing, like Sue mentioned, sort of interoception, what's happening inside of our bodies, also noticing our perception, the way we perceive the world, also taking in information and processing it about what our nervous system experiences of the world and making sense of all that stuff. So just knowing that it's happening. So this is this clever part of the brain at the front here. And if you curl your fingers away, you've got your thumb. Sorry, I get very dry mouth when I get nervous because I'm talking to lots of people. Your thumb, we kind of think of as the central part of the brain, and you can think of this as kind of, very simply, this you can think of as sort of sensations, memory, feelings, that kind of stuff. It's much more complicated, but this is a nice simple way of looking at it. If you uncurl your thumb, you're left here with the back part of the brain, and this is the part of the brain that really deals with threat. Yeah, so this part of the brain only has 3 options available. And again, Sue mentioned them: fight, flight, and freeze. There's also feign, but we don't need to go into that in too much depth. So I think most people have heard of fight and flight. Feeling really agitated, chest comes out, shoulders back, fast heart rate, blood pumps to the extremities to help us run. Flight is similar, but it's hunched in. It's also a fast heart rate, blood to the extremities. Freeze is a little bit different. It's a slow heart rate and the blood comes away from the extremities because it's about protecting our central part of our body. You can put your hand down if you like. It's kind of, your arm will start aching after a little while. You can just watch my hand if you like. So if you come back to this is my brain when it's, I'm going to call it online. So these are like Wi-Fi bars, I always think of them as. So it's like, if I'm perceiving something, and let's just go with being mindful because that's what we're talking about. If I'm being mindful and when I perceive the sensations in my body or the sounds or whatever it is that I'm being asked to sit still with, and my nervous system is a little bit more responsive than someone else's for whatever reason, I'm very quickly going to perceive that as quite threatening. And this part of my brain is going to start to go offline. Worst case scenario, we go all the way offline and we are literally in fight, flight or freeze. Now, we all do this throughout any given day. You know, we're all stressed, we all lose our keys, we all get annoyed. We all kind of go like, you know, sort of 1 or 2 bars going offline, and it's kind of okay. And even during mindfulness, I think, you know, it's okay to be getting a bit worried or feeling a bit agitated or a bit sort of dulled. You know, this is okay. This is where noticing under, you know, everyday circumstances is really useful, kind of coming into the presence and noticing that this is what's happening. If there is a sensory processing issue, for me and in my experience in myself and with clients, what I've noticed is that people are doing this, you know, and so this part of them that's able to perceive what's happening isn't there. And so it's so a big part of the work that I've been trying to kind of explore, and I'm really just still exploring it myself. It's a work in progress, and I'm running all sorts of different workshops, and I'm going to be running some workshops for some neurodivergent students at a drama school in the UK, and kind of collecting data as to what I'm doing does or doesn't work and see what kind of comes out of that. But sort of, for me, it's kind of thinking, oh, okay, so in my understanding and the training that I've done about this kind of stuff, you know, my brain's gone offline, my heart rate is either going really slow or going really fast, and my brain isn't in a place to notice. When I then think about being mindful, I'm then thinking, what can I do in my body that sort of brings me into noticing? So that's my next PowerPoint. What can we do? So I think, for me, there's so many things that we can do, and there's all those fantastic things that Sue was talking about, and I've done loads of her videos, and I follow her on Spotify and do all her Spotify stuff, because there are these other ways of practicing mindfulness that I think really can take account of this. So I think one of the things that I think is really great is if you know this stuff, if you understand this stuff, even just a little bit, and you know that huge quantities of the people in your classes, in your workshops, in your therapy rooms are very likely going to be people that kind of can go offline quite easily and feel really shut down or really over agitated in a way that means they can't be present, just knowing that might mean that you sort of think, oh, okay, let me check in a little bit differently. So just having some understanding of that is, to me, is just a brilliant place to start. The offering alternatives thing, I really wanted to say this thing about hierarchy. So I've got a real thing about whenever I go to like yoga classes and mindfulness classes and stuff, and people offer alternatives, and they offer, they say something like, oh, you know, notice your breath, and if that's not comfortable for you, then you can always do X, Y, or Z. Or it's like in a yoga class when they say, you know, do this pose, and if you can't do that, you can always do this with a block. And what I hear, and I don't know if this is what other people hear, but what I hear is the alternatives are for if you're not very good at this. And we're all competitive, it's part of being human, it's part of what's kept us alive. And so we tend to go for the thing that we're told is the ideal. So if we present an ideal and then say, hey, these other things are kind of options if you're a bit rubbish or you're a bit traumatized or you're neurodivergent. For starters, a lot of neurodivergent people don't know they're neurodivergent. I lived much of my life before I found out about some aspects of my neurodivergence. And some people might not know at all. And the same goes for trauma. So we might not be thinking about what trauma is, or we might not identify with that. So it's just worth always sort of thinking. I think Sue said in the last talk that she did, it's like there will always be people from these groups in your class. There will always be people, and I've always thought that with psychotherapy as well. There will always be clients coming into your room who will belong to these groups. So having a little bit of understanding goes a really long way. Just even a little bit. It doesn't, you don't have to be an expert, just holding it in mind. So for me, the alternatives thing of not offering them as a hierarchy, but just kind of presenting, well, we're going to focus on our breath. We can do this in this way, or this way. Kind of, you just saw Sue do it, you know, this, or this. And each time she said this, or this, no kind of this, or I guess you could do this, you know, sort of secondary. For me, this is really important. Also, for me, there's something in there around autism, and this is personal, and I know it's not everyone, but I follow rules. And if someone tells me this is the ideal, I will attempt to do it. And I've certainly had experiences in retreats and meditation classes in my lifetime where I've probably been in a really unwell space because I was probably offered alternatives, but I was doing what I thought was the good thing, the best thing, the rule. So just being aware of that way we might word things, and the way some people might not hear alternatives clearly if they're not presented clearly. And it absolutely exactly the same as Sue said. The thing that I found really works is moving. So moving the body, moving the lower parts of the body in particular, moving the hands and moving the eyes. I'm just checking my timing. So where am I? I'm gonna end my share for that for now. So one of the things that I'm really interested in is how different movements can be useful for different states. So, and what they can do. So one of the things Sue talked about the eyes. I'm fascinated by the eyes and what they are. They are in fact exposed parts of the human brain. So if we move our eyes differently, we really can change our brain state. So if you kind of got loads of people coming into a mindfulness class or a one-to-one session, and the likelihood is they're coming from car journeys and outside and work and studies and families and all sorts of different things. And even if they're not, even if they're just walking into a Zoom session online, again, as someone who identifies as neurodivergent, lots of things can feel quite overwhelming for me. So I might arrive having done nothing all day and still feel quite overwhelmed and stressed for whatever different reasons. So whatever someone's been doing, just knowing that they're arriving perhaps not in a place where noticing is that easy anyway. But if they're inclined to do this, if they're inclined to going really offline, there are some really useful things that we can think about with the eyes in particular. So if Sue's one of kind of looking up, absolutely big favourite of mine, peripheral vision is another really big favourite of mine, which is literally just hands out to a T if you can, or as Sue said, just looking for the widest spots. I have to use my hands to find peripheral vision. It's just the way I work. So I'm often sort of saying, if you can't find peripheral vision, and you can do this laying down as well, or you can do it with your arms resting on the back of a sort of winged armchair, or you can do it standing. But peripheral vision is for me is an alternative to closing your eyes or lowering your eyes as well. So we could say something like, okay, we're going to start, you know, or you could all just move your eyes from left to right quickly. So just scanning the horizon without moving the head. Great nervous system reset. We can all do that. It looks a bit funny, but it's really good. And like I say, the eyes moving and what they do influences what the brain does. So actually it's interesting, if you come into your Zoom and you stare like this for a really long period of time, you actually start to trigger your threat response, because it's linked, staring and threat response. So peripheral vision is a great way, looking up above your screen. Peripheral vision is another really great way, moving the eyes from left to right. It's a great way to start things sometimes, just moving the eyes a little bit. The other thing that I think is really important is this idea of stillness, and that being an ideal with meditation. So I am also someone who has ADHD going on in my brain, and sitting still has been one of the things that I've fought hardest with mindfulness. And so my favourite movement is moving from left to right, and any left or any bilateral movement is a bit like the eye movement. It will communicate something to the brain, and it does start to bring us back online. So one of the ones I like is either a really slow shift from left to right on the bottom. If you couldn't sit, you could move the hands left to right if you were laying in bed. So sometimes I've got chronic health issues and I can't get up and sit in chairs. So if I'm laying in bed, I press my feet against the wall and I just put a little bit of pressure through the left and right foot. And actually, if you're sitting in a chair and you press through the left foot and then the right foot, you start to bring a little bit of energy up through the lower part of the body, if that's available to you. And it might not be. If it's not, you can always use your hands. And actually, there's an amazing guy called Moshe Feldenkrais. And he created a type of movement work. And one of the things that he talks a lot about is imagining is as good as doing. So if you imagine the movement, you're actually kind of almost doing it. So if you really couldn't move at all, you could imagine. Eyes movement brings us back online. Moving through the bottom half of the body actually can help to bring us out of a freeze state, because it brings life back into the legs. So as I said, fight, flight and freeze are different. Freeze brings the blood away from the arms and legs to protect the torso, and the heart rate gets very low. If we start to move the hands and the legs in particular, left and right, like I say, bilateral movement is great, pressing the feet in and out, or just rocking on your sitting bone, you start to wake up the part of the body and get blood flowing back into the part of the body that's going offline. So again, you're bringing yourself back online with the very movements that you can bring into mindfulness, you know. But again, also with regards to ADHD, for me, I like to sometimes bring the movement a little bit faster. Sometimes I make it really, really small, and I hope that people on Zoom can't see me when I'm in classes or I'm talking to them, because I can't always sit still for everyone else is kind of like this for like an hour, and I'm always like, wow, how do they do that? Because I need to move. So I think moving from left to right, like I say, is really, really lovely one. And I will very quickly say something about an example of alternatives with hands. Laying on hands is great. We talk about noticing parts of the body. For some people, it's not possible. They can't feel the sensation. Imagination is available as well. I really like saying, lay the hands on, or notice, or pat, or rub. We've got the cheek, you know, the upper chest, the belly, or don't touch at all, you know. But but we don't have to hierarchy the noticing. Sometimes just having a little pat is actually the way that we can bring ourselves into noticing that place, or a little rub. And this is part of the self-compassion for me, part of mindfulness that we often miss out on, which is like, this is lovely, this is comforting. If you place your hand on your cheek, it feels really nice. You can, I mean, I don't know if you're all having a go with me or not, but you're very welcome to. So again, there's no hierarchy of noticing without hands, or with hands patting or moving or still. There's just different ways of noticing things, and slowly coming into noticing and out of noticing is another thing that I do lots of, but I won't go into too much more because I think we're kind of running out of time. But yeah, just generally, you know, for me, it's something I feel really, really passionate about, and I'm really interested in this idea of kind of linking the science up with how do we find the tools that work when we're offline, when we're in fight, when we're in flight, when we're in freeze. It can actually be quite different. And just knowing even 2 or 3 of those things that you could kind of just drop in might be useful. For me, it's been really, really useful, really rewarding. But that's it. That's me. And
Jessica, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Very fast. I'm sorry.
No, it came across great. But and in both your presentations, such a sort of so rich in in information. But you know, as a mindfulness teacher, I'm sitting here sort of also thinking, gosh, can I do all of these things? How can I increase my knowledge? How can I work these in? But I guess the point both of you are making is to even just to start with some level of awareness and a handful of techniques, and maybe changing our approach, the around hierarchy that you're saying. Even those small things can begin to make a real change. So